Welcome to Genuine University's webinar on being more yourself. I'm Peter Haggerty and I'll be leading you through the webinar this evening. I'd like to start with a fairly bold statement, and that is that being yourself is a journey, an adventure without drama. So what I mean by that is if you are actually being yourself, then it feels like an adventure. It doesn't feel like a drama. When you're not being yourself, when you're out of alignment with who you are, is when you have drama and you have all sorts of weird and wonderful annoyances and disasters occurring. I mean, these are advantageous in a certain way to have those come up, but if we look at them as a way of helping us get back on track, then we can also fold them into an adventure rather than a drama. So if you simply commit to being yourself and realize that that is a journey, then life becomes far more of an adventure than a drama. And I want to take you into just how to do those things this evening. We ran a webinar 2 weeks ago called Being Yourself, and although I feel that I got a lot of information across that was very useful during that webinar, I felt that I just didn't get across anywhere near as much as I would have liked. So I'm running another one along the same lines called Being More Yourself, which is the one that we're running tonight. I still also have the issue of feeling like I'm not going to be telling you enough tonight. So there is a fair bit of information, and we will go into a little bit of detail and so on. But for those of you who don't know much about me or Genuine University, there are other webinars which are available from anybody that you might know. Our website isn't quite up just yet, but also if you look on YouTube, you can download the webinars there by searching for Genuine University, spelt in the way that you see on the screen at the top there. So if you want to find out more about GU, which is what I call Genuine University, or about me, feel free to go back to those other webinars. I won't carry on about myself so much right now, but I will do a bit of a recap of what we explored 2 weeks ago. And what we explored last week was around having more fun, and certainly being yourself is intrinsically linked to having fun. And if you want to be more informed on that, then obviously you can go to last week's webinar as well. So just to recap the webinar from Being Yourself, I'll just go through some of the very main points of it. How to be yourself, the first stage of it is patience. St. Francis de Sales says, have patience with all things, but first of all with yourself. Pardon me, I'm just going to mute. I need to clear my throat. Okay, so I'm being patient with myself because I couldn't quite get my words out there. So St. Francis de Sales says, have patience with all things, but first of all with yourself. Patience is the beginning of being yourself, because if you're not patient with who you are, then you'll be distracted by all sorts of things, and you'll be led down a track of people telling you who you should be and how you should behave. So patience with yourself is intrinsic, and it is fundamental to the whole process of being yourself. And almost in the same theme, being yourself is really related to self-acceptance. Nathaniel Brand there, we have a quote from him saying, self-acceptance is my refusal to be in an adversarial relationship to myself. So it's almost like I refuse to fight with myself. And when you refuse to fight with yourself, it does rely upon patience. That acceptance does rely upon having patience with yourself, and this is why I'm presenting them in this order. When you accept yourself, you have exercised patience firstly, but you're also doing more than just being patient, because patience is quite passive. Self-acceptance is quite an active endeavor. You might even become introspective and explore parts of yourself and see certain areas of yourself that you could go, you know what, I have this habit that I don't like, or I keep obsessing about something I did when I was in the 3rd grade at school, or whatever the case may be, and then you can simply accept, yes, that is what I did. That is something that I did. I know when I was doing a lot of yoga, one of the teachers used to say, practice radical self-acceptance. And one of the things that, is really advisable in yoga is not to try to compete with, well, firstly, anyone else, and secondly, with yourself. You don't compete with yourself. Some days you'll be really good on a stretch, some days you'll be strong, other days you just need to basically lie on the ground and have a nice little nap. Yoga is really beautiful like that, because the more you accept where you're at, generally the further you can go, and it's very much the same with the rest of life. Another aspect of being yourself, we have patience and acceptance, and then of course self-love is incredibly important, and it's even more active than simple patience. Siddhartha says, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. So I want to go even a little bit further and talk about what I call the law of lesser rejection, which is something that I spoke about in the Being Yourself webinar. But just to elaborate a little bit on self-love. Self-love, like when you love somebody else, I mean, we tend to be more capable of imagining that than imagining self-love. Firstly, it's kind of hard to see ourselves as we are. So how do we know what to love and, or in the case of hypercritical people, what not to love? Imagine if you're loving somebody else, they might have habits or certain tendencies, or they might, that you don't like, or they might hurt you and so on. And sometimes you just go, you know what? There's so much more to this person, and there's so much more expansion that I receive through being involved with this person, that these things aren't that important. And so you just choose to let them go. And so self-love also has an aspect of self-acceptance in it, which is choosing to let go of the things about yourself that you don't necessarily like very much. Or more to the point, choosing to let go of the attitude toward yourself in relation to the things that you don't like about yourself. So you say, you know what, I don't like that I go back to bed after getting up in the morning. Let's say you don't like that about yourself. Then simply loving yourself for that can engender, and it can go back the other way, it can engender self-acceptance, and then comes patience. So they each build upon one another. So another aspect of self-love is using what I call the law of lesser rejection. Now, I went through this a while ago, or 2 weeks ago. However, I'll go through it again because I feel that it's really important. And this is basically about having patience with what you would like to express, having acceptance for what you would like to express, and loving yourself enough for what you would like to express to actually express it. So the law of lesser rejection is quite simple. So I've got a little stick figure, and let's just assume that that's you. And imagine that there is something that you would like to express out into the world. Something that is unique to you perhaps, or maybe it's not unique. Maybe you just want to do a cover song or something like that, but it'll be in your own unique way, of course. But let's say there's something, whatever it may be, that you wish to express into the world. And you might want to have a think about that right now. What is it that you would actually like to express into the world, whatever that may be? And there's a chance that if you express it into the world, that you may be accepted. And so we've got a big green tick there, symbolizing that you might be accepted. But there's also a chance that you might be rejected with that X there. Now, the law of lesser rejection is about you experiencing less rejection in your life. And you might think that the way that you do that is by not putting yourself out there and not going for what is important to you. But the opposite is true, because if you don't put out into the world what you would like to express, then rather than in order to stop the chance of being rejected by the outside world, if you don't do that, if you don't express what's true for you, then you've already rejected yourself. So if we look at those two arrows there, one's pointing toward a tick, one's pointing toward an X. and let's say, you know, there's 50-50 chance of you being accepted and a 50% chance of you being rejected. If you don't actually put it out into the world, then you are already rejecting yourself. And what this means is that the way to experience less rejection is actually to put out into the world what you want to express. Now, I don't necessarily mean that you should do that without any censoring or editing or crafting of your message whatsoever. And there are a lot of examples in the last webinar on being yourself that I showed you, which is basically, you know, one example of a woman singing "I Will Always Love You" on a flight from New York to Los Angeles, and then the flight has an unscheduled stop in Kansas in order to get this woman off the flight because she just simply wouldn't stop singing it. And she was singing it when she was led into the I can't remember what you call it, into the I want to call it a loading area where you have all the people waiting, you know, into the gate. Thank you. And another example of a guy who was, sorry, not a guy, a 13-year-old boy who was arrested for excessive farting in class. So, I mean, being yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you don't take into account other people, and some of the art of that is what we'll be going through this evening. So last time, the main points that I put across as the actual core of the Being Yourself webinar, we've pretty much already gone through. Now we'll get into some more nitty-gritty stuff, and I talked a little bit about discipline last time. Now, I want to give you two definitions of discipline in order to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about during the webinar. The first one is that discipline is being a disciple of that which is within. So it's almost like the word discipline is disciple in, and it's a bit of a play on words there. So being a disciple of that which is within is about obeying something that is within you that is more important to you than what is on the outside. Okay, so that's one definition of discipline. The next definition is about priorities, pretty much. Discipline is about knowing what your priorities are and putting first things first. And it means sacrificing what is less important for what is more important. So let's say that you need to be focused and clear and mentally on the ball in order to do something, but you really just want to have a chocolate milkshake. Now, a chocolate milkshake doesn't necessarily affect everybody in the same way, but let's say that a chocolate milkshake makes you mentally cloudy. Then obviously discipline in that case would mean not having the chocolate milkshake, but instead making a choice to focus on being clear, on being focused, in fact. So it's not about, discipline in this case is not about depriving yourself of the chocolate milkshake. Perhaps you need to be mentally clear for a particular reason, and then after that, you go and have the chocolate milkshake. That's discipline, because you've decided that one thing is more important than another, and you align yourself with those priorities. I believe that the phrase "first things first" is from The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey, absolutely brilliant book. And this is about discipline. This is about being aligned with what your priorities are. Now, and this is what you do on the outside, but of course those priorities ideally will be generated from what is within you. So in other words, discipline on the outside, the sacrifice that you might make, is actually because you are a disciple of that which is within you. So that's just what I want to say about discipline in and of itself. Discipline is about choosing to be who you really are, and then taking action based on who you feel you really are. Now, you might not be completely accurate and completely on the ball about who you are, because, I mean, let's face it, if we start looking within, it's almost as though there's a whole universe in there. In fact, there's more possible connections, like neuron connections in the top part of your brain in the corpus callosum. There's more possible connections in that part of your brain than there are atoms in the known universe. So if you think that knowing yourself is as easy as pie, then just think about that. There are more possible connections in the top part of your brain than there are atoms in the known universe. So, I mean, you could be anything. And that's why I say that that being yourself is very much an adventure. And it is a lifelong journey. And if you believe in reincarnation, perhaps it's even longer than that. So I have a saying here which I feel is quite relevant, and that is that life is a journey, and if you fall in love with the journey, you'll be in love forever. And I'd love you to fall in love with the journey of being yourself, of tuning into who you really are and getting to know who you are, because you can experience more patience, acceptance and love on that path than you could possibly imagine. And maybe you can imagine quite a lot, but if you then undertake that amount and achieve that amount of patience, self-acceptance and self-love, then guess what? There's more in there, because if you're going inside, it's just a matter of like focusing in ever finer detail on who you really are. And that's a magnificent journey. So we'll get into how to be yourself a little bit more deeply. Now, I've mapped out 12 main stages on the journey to being more yourself. Now, these 12 stages are, a lot of them are taken from Joseph Campbell's work, who is a genius mythologist. Like, he was, if you ever get a chance to see him speaking, like, I'm in on YouTube, he's passed away now, but if you get to see his videos and so on, or hear his recordings, or read his book, Hero with a Thousand Faces, I highly recommend doing that. Now, these 12 stages are modeled on his work. A lot of people say that there's 6 stages, or 18, or 22, or something like that. Now, I've come up with 12, and I've kind of molded it into 12 because I needed it to work in 3 main chapters, so to speak, for 4 different levels of being. So there's 4 levels of being, and we go through 3 iterations of getting those aligned and actually using them and functioning with them in the world. And so that's why I've got 12 main stages on the journey to being more yourself. Now, each of those stages focuses on a different aspect of your being. Because, I mean, as soon as we start looking at ourselves, we realize that there are many aspects to us. There's an ancient Hermetic saying, which I'll paraphrase pretty badly because they, a lot of the things they talk about don't make much sense to the modern person. And Hermetics is like about 5,000 years old. So, and, you know, we don't know whether the translation's incredibly accurate, but I think you'll get the spirit of this. And basically it goes like this. There is a core self to you that does many different things. When you are sitting, when you are eating, when you are talking, when you are being silent, if you are watching something, if you are traveling, if you are swimming, if you are jumping, whatever it may be, whatever it is that you are doing, there is a core self that is doing all of those things. All of those things are an expression of the core self. And in order to know the core self, we engage in those expressions. And that's basically, for those of you who might have read the Hermetica, you'll know that I've paraphrased quite wildly with that one. But I'd like to modernize a little bit. I usually talk about talking on telephones and things like that. Okay, so if we talk about the 12 stages, I want to give you some examples of people that might be going through these stages. just so that it makes it more concrete for you. And you might also want to imagine, you know, how might I be doing something in that stage? And it's not necessarily going to give you the experience of going through those stages, because, I mean, really this is an informational webinar, and that's what Genuine University is about, is guiding you through those. And I've come up with a very, very unique way of doing this, because what I'm effectively attempting to do is to come up with something that's fairly universal that can take each and every person on a very different journey. So I've crafted a vehicle over the last 20 or 30 years. And you know, you can take that vehicle wherever you like, but the vehicle has some certain commonalities to it, and these 12 stages are one of those commonalities. So if you give you the example of like somebody wanting to start a small business to help out their family, let's say that's something that's really important for them. They feel an urge to do this. It's like maybe they've got a job and they don't feel like they're quite doing what they want to be doing in their job. I mean, somebody else might, you know, want to have a 9-to-5 job, and that's their truth, and that's great. Okay, so I'm not necessarily saying anything is better than anything else. I'm just giving you some examples. Then we might have somebody else who wants to be a graphic artist. And then we might have somebody else who just feels stuck, and rather than knowing where they want to go, they know what they don't want. And perhaps they feel restricted by their family. In other words, you know, the family they grew up in, their nuclear family, their mother and father and siblings. And they love their family, but they feel that if they do whatever they want, even though they don't know what it is, that it's going to somehow ruin their family. And I mean, there's a lot of people in this situation who feel that if they express themselves faithfully, that they end up hurting somebody else. Okay, so these are just the broad examples that I'm going to be going with as we go through these stages. Okay, so stage 1. When you want to be more yourself, you need to do what's called a reality check. And this is a stage where you use your mind a lot. You use your mind to collect evidence about who you really are, and it's quite intellectual. Now, a lot of the exercises and so on that you'll find in, I wish I could say there's other programs about finding a purpose and so on, but I mean on the internet, but I haven't come across very much. Most of the ones that I have come across, they stop here. They go, okay, you can use your mind to figure out your purpose. And you can't really use your mind to determine who you are, because your mind is an aspect of who you are. And your mind is actually an aspect which is more divisive than it is creative. I know there's a lot of stuff around these days that talks about the mind being creative, but it's more about the mind actually taking creative energy and focusing it. The mind is, if we use a projector analogy, the mind is, you know, the film that might be in the projector. It's not actually the projector. It's not the light. It doesn't give the energy. I mean, the film without light is quite pointless. But then light in and of itself, you know, if it's not focused, doesn't always give us the kind of things that we want to see. So the mind actually just kind of directs things. But we can use our mind also to analyze what we are seeing. So if you look at what's in our life and take stock and really, like, you know, boldly look at what the truth of how we express ourselves really is, then we get a whole lot of clues about what's important to us in our expression. And then if we express ourselves faithfully, then we start to get more in touch with who we actually are. Because, as I was saying before, it's a never-ending journey, and if we express ourselves faithfully, then we are actually on the track and we're moving. And all that really matters is that you're on the track and in motion. That's really all that counts. So the first stage is a reality check, where you might make a list of your values and so on. And usually when I get people to do a values list, what comes out is about 60% incorrect, because we have it's almost like our mind convinces us of what our values should be, and then we believe that they are our values. But then if we use our mind in a different way and actually look at reality, then we get to see what our values are. So, you know, you might have somebody who says, you know, my values are working really hard, and they only work 5 hours a week. In this case, if you use your mind to actually look at, well, how much time do you actually work, then you would go, okay, well, maybe that's not a high value for you. What are you doing instead with your time? And then and maybe they're drawing, for instance. You know, maybe they want to be a graphic artist, or maybe they want to be an actor or something like that, or maybe they want to run a business. I had one guy who I worked with who was given a business when he was a baker, and when he became qualified, his father had more than one shop, and he gave him a bakery, and he was miserable. And he ended up pretty well running the bakery into the ground. And he kept on saying that his values were, and what was really important to him, was to have his own business. And then through doing some work with him, it became pretty clear that what he loved doing was basically almost like a Zen type activity. And he wanted to do something like, he was always reading about Zen, you know, Zen Buddhism and so on, and how to simplify things and how to live an uncomplicated life and all this. And he also realized that he liked to be part of an organization where he knew where he stood and what he had to do, and when he did what he did, then he was done. It was, you know, as you might know, most business people don't get to do that. So this guy, in the end, we worked out that what he really wanted to do was be a street sweeper. Now, a lot of people might think that's a massive step down for somebody. But for him, like if you could see the look on his face when he thought about, you know, driving this truck which effectively did street sweeping, for him it was like a meditation. It was very Zen for him. It wasn't complicated at all. You know, if there's a car in the way, I go around it and I keep on going. And it's really very simple. And for him, that was blissful. So in these webinars that I'm running, it's not all about, you know, go out there and make more money and rah, 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 and, you know, become more a picture of the success that you're supposed to have, that society is telling you to have. Now, it might be. I mean, I've taken some clients from being in a situation where they're living in their car to running multi-million-dollar businesses and then owning all sorts of properties and so on, instead of just living in their car. You know, they have many cars. So, you know, it doesn't matter. What I'm about and what Genuine University is about is, who are you really? And the reality check gives you some clues. It doesn't necessarily tell you everything, but if you really look at what your life demonstrates, then you can get some very, very good clues as to what your values really are. And when you know what your values are, then you know how you truly wish to express yourself. And we've talked about values in previous webinars, and there'll be more on values to come. Next week we're running a webinar called Clarity is Power, and we'll be doing some actual work, and you'll get some exercises to do on values itself. So the very first stage in being more yourself is getting real, actually having a very clear, as unbiased as possible look at what your values really are, and what you really want to do and how you would love to express yourself. Now, the next stage in being more yourself, stage 2, is listening to yourself. And this is not so much a mental exercise as it is a feeling into who you really are, and just sensing what the truth about you might be, and almost intuiting who you are in that space. And it's about being patient and kind to yourself and allowing your truth to emerge. It's almost like there's a process that a favoured author of mine, David Data, suggests to people quite frequently, or suggests it to men to get clear on their purpose mainly, and that is to simply sit and be still and effectively wait for your purpose to be revealed to you. Now, in many ways that is an effective technique. However, it is taught in that that school of thought as though that's the way, that is the way to do it. And I can tell you there are plenty of ways of doing it. It's just one of them. It's just one of the colors in the rainbow. Because if you are able to look at your life in certain ways and then go out and do things and then get feedback, then the amount of techniques that there are available to get clear on what your purpose is and how you want to express yourself and basically who you want to be and who you really are, the amount of techniques that then emerge, it's almost endless. I mean, I've got an embarrassingly long list of processes and techniques. I started cataloguing them a few years ago, and I'm up to about 85 just now. But this one is very important. I'd recommend doing it in a way which works for you. You don't necessarily have to meditate. I had one person that I worked with who found that riding her bike was the way that she listened to herself. I mean, the way that I do it these days is by chopping wood. You know, like we have a wood-fired heater and stove and so on, and I just really enjoy cutting the wood for that, and it seems to give me a lot of clarity. So the idea that you have to sit on a meditation stool with incense burning and there has to be birds chirping in the background and things, and then you'll be able to listen to yourself is really a bit dogmatic. Doesn't have to be that way. And people have realizations in the most bizarre circumstances. I mean, we've all probably experienced a time when we're trying to think of something and somebody else comes along and says something about the weather or how they got a flat tire on their car or something, and we go, oh wow, you're a genius, because apparently they prompted something in us and what they've said has nothing to do with what we've come up with. So I mean, that's just a small example of how listening to yourself doesn't have to be formalized or, you know, like a rigid sort of thing. I knew somebody a while ago who felt that the way that he wanted to listen to himself was to go to a mental hospital, and he basically admitted himself and sat around amongst some rather disturbed people for a few days, and he felt that having this din of people saying things which weren't, the patterns of which weren't really accessible to him, like in other words, he didn't know what they were on about, he found that incredibly meditative, and he got very clear on what he wanted to do. So it's like, yeah, I can come up with a lot more examples, but I'm realizing I'm babbling a little bit. We need to move on. So stage 3, after listening to yourself, is eliminating self-sabotage. So, and I've got 2 slides on this, just so you know. So, eliminating self-sabotage is far easier than people realize. And all it requires is a change in perspective. And what you do is you find the value in holding yourself back. So you go, I mean, we've got a picture there of a guy like preparing to shoot himself in the foot. I mean, at certain times, that's a very good idea. You know, under certain circumstances. I don't recommend that you go and do it as a result of listening to this webinar. But certainly if, you know, I mean, if you're a pacifist and you don't want to go to war, then maybe that's a solution for you, if that's what your values are. And I'm not necessarily recommending that you do that. You know, so, but, you know, there are times when doing things that, according to your judgment system or your mental system of looking at things, there are times when doing particular things are actually a good idea for you. And this is like brings me to the subject of procrastination. Generally, when people are procrastinating, they're doing it for a good reason. And almost all the procrastination treatments that are out there, you know, involve some sort of way of becoming an adversary with yourself. The way to deal with procrastination is step 1, the whole self-acceptance idea, throw that out. Get rid of that, because I can't accept that I won't go and do my taxes. I can't accept that I won't go and visit my mother-in-law who's really nasty to me, whatever the case may be. and I should do these things, and I should do this, and I should do that. The first step in eliminating self-sabotage is, once again, patience with yourself, self-acceptance, and self-love. And just giving yourself the space to do the things that you feel that you actually want to do. I think I've used this example in previous webinars. Something I like doing is playing computer games, and sometimes I've got certain things that I need to get done, and I'll be playing a computer game, and I might be, needing to get something done by a deadline, and I'm just playing the game and playing the game and playing the game, and then all of a sudden I have an idea and I go and do 10 hours work in an hour, because that's my process. That's how I work. I remember on one occasion I was working with a business partner, and he wanted me to write a particular piece in order to get something across for a proposal that we were putting together, and I did nothing for about 5 days. It was due like in 6 days' time. And then he turns up one morning, and as he's walking in, I just put my hand up and say, "No, don't say anything." And I sat down at my computer, and 15 minutes flat, bam, it's done. Okay, so that's my process. I have a very bizarre writing process. And I remember when I was about around the ages of 18 and 19, I must have read 25 books on how to write. And it screwed me up for years. It took me about 3 years to get over all of those rules. So one way of eliminating self-sabotage is to accept yourself, to be patient with yourself, accept yourself, and love yourself. And usually you'll find that the thing that you're doing to sabotage yourself is actually pointing you in a particular direction. And if you give yourself permission to go in that direction, and like ask a question like, "Hey, what if I just went over there?" Like a guy I worked with who was 4 years into his medical degree, could not continue. He said, "I feel like I want to be ill every time I go to university." And I asked him, and he was basically wanting me to help him stop sabotaging himself and force him and trick him and hypnotize him or something into studying. And I said, "Well, where are your medical books?" And he's like, "Oh, they're under a pile of dirty clothes and all that sort of stuff." And I'm like, he says, "I don't know quite where they are." Then I asked, "Well, do you have a bookshelf?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, why don't you put them there?" And he says, "It's full." So I asked him, "Well, what's in the bookshelf?" And he's like, "Oh, my car books." And through a process of investigation, it became clear that he was fascinated with cars, and those books had pride of place. And when he wasn't studying medicine, he was out fixing a mate's car. And long story short, he's not a doctor now. He owns 4 workshops and is constantly going from one workshop to another, working on the really difficult stuff, because that's what he loves doing. And also, something to be noted is that as far as money goes, the whole point of him wanting to be a doctor was around the money. But he makes more money than most doctors because he's doing very well in business, and he's dedicated to it. So he eliminated his self-sabotage by giving up medicine. So he thought his self-sabotage was actually what was stopping him from studying medicine, but in fact his self-sabotage was stopping him from being a mechanic, because that's what was important to him. So we've got 2 slides on self-sabotage. So I love this next photo. I couldn't resist putting it in. Somebody standing in a boat with a hammer or an axe or something and basically chopping the bottom out of it. Now, another way you can eliminate self-sabotage is using that internal resistance to find out where you really want to go, like in the example with the medical student who became a mechanic. Now, you might think that chopping the bottom out of a boat is a bad idea and it's a form of self-sabotage, but what if whoever's doing that, it looks like a guy in the picture, but what if this guy is wanting to see whether he can swim a certain distance in desperate circumstances? Then he's getting exactly what he wants by destroying the boat that he's standing in. Because sometimes in order to know ourselves, we have to put ourselves under a lot of pressure. So, he's basically expressing where he is going by doing that. And self-sabotage is a brilliant way of finding out where you really want to go. So stage 3, eliminating self-sabotage, is nothing more than admitting what you really want. And it kind of folds into stage 4, which is letting go of dogma. Stage 4 is also very much listening to yourself, but you almost let your mind open up to an unprecedented degree. And you simply allow yourself to dream and feel into what you would love to do. That's all. You don't have to do 5 million things, because let's say that you bring a mental approach or an intellectual approach into stage 4, you will screw it up, because you don't figure out what you feel is inspiring to you. You don't figure that one out. And I have a lot of people come to me and go, Peter, help me figure out my purpose. And what I hear is, Peter, I'm stuck in my head, and I don't know that I am, and I'd like to not be. And then so I have to kind of merge into their intellectual perspective of things and get them to feel things and get them to be more instinctual about things. And then their purpose starts to emerge. And they get this strange experience. And this is what letting go of dogma does for you. You get this strange experience of realizing something about yourself that, firstly, you had no idea that this was true about you. But secondly, you always knew it was true about you. So this is a bizarre experience. You had no idea it was true, but you always knew it was true. I mean, how does that work? And this is where we come into the different levels of being, and we'll go into that in detail later, because basically on a mental level, you have no idea what you want to do and who you are. But on a heart level or a body level or an instinctual or emotional level, you always knew. And this is part of the big challenge in being yourself is like, what level are we actually engaging in? And are we doing, what I've called before, are we doing a modality mismatch, where we're trying to, use aromatherapy to heal our fractured leg or something? I mean, aromatherapy is great, but I wouldn't want to use it on my fractured leg. But then, a lot of the time when it comes to modern medicine, there's a lot of things that people think you have to use modern medicine for, which I know from experience, modern medicine is simply not the most effective method. And so if you're trying to think through what feels right for you, then you're not going to be able to allow yourself to dream and feel into what you love to do. And a lot of the time, this stage can also involve expressing your emotions more freely than previously. I don't mean expressing them with complete abandon, and I don't mean suppressing them either. But and when people need to express their emotions in order to let go of certain things, in order to get some clarity about what's true for them, often what will happen if they're using their mind in a heart-based sphere of their being, what they'll say is, I need to figure out why I feel this way in order to feel it. And often I'll say, how long have you been trying to do that? And they're like, about 15 years. And I go, okay, have you given that enough of a go? Have you tried that out enough to know that that's not working for you? And, you've got to say it in a logical way, because the logic is what's going to get through, because they're in a logical mode. And then I say to them, okay, I want to tell you from experience and with my logical approach to things, and all the stats tell me that 99% of the time, and you know what, I think it's higher than that, but let's just say 99, we're being conservative, 99% of the time, when people feel their emotions in a way that is really, really wise and well-directed, once they feel it, the reason for the emotion being there pops out, and usually it can take somewhere between 5 minutes and 5 hours, and not 15 years. And so usually they'll go for that. So stage 4, you let go of dogma and just allow what is coming from within you to come out. Allow yourself to dream and feel into what you would love to do. And you'll notice in this stage there is nothing there saying then go and fill out a form or a personality analysis sheet or something like that and provide evidence of your dreams, etc., etc. It's just about la, 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 let's go off with the pixies. Give yourself some time to do that. It doesn't mean quit your job and go and live in the forest forever. It just means give yourself a break. I had one lady who just felt that she wanted to go and read a novel in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. And that's what she did, and things started shifting. It can be anything, a bit like when we were talking about stage 2. You could go and commit yourself to a mental asylum to get some clarity of mind. Whatever works for you. But it's about letting go of dogma. Now that's the first third of the 12 stages. And it is very much about an introspective type thing. And the second third, or the middle third, 5, 6, 7, and 8, are more active. So stage 5, it's just the beginning of action, and we start considering action. So we draw up some battle plans, so to speak. We get an idea about what it is that we might want to do, and we anticipate and plan a course of action. That's it. We anticipate and plan a course of action. Nothing else. We don't then go out and register a business name or, in the case of the person wanting to start a business, we don't go and tell our family where to go, the person who's having trouble with their family, or we don't suddenly go and hire a gallery and put up our drawings all of a sudden just because, we're in the action stage now. What it would look more like in those examples that I was talking about before is drawing up a business plan, perhaps. Looking at places where you could exhibit your drawings. Actually looking at other people in the family about the things that they would like to do in their life, and perhaps encouraging other people in the family, or thinking about what you could encourage them to do in order to actually express themselves more faithfully, and thus giving yourself more chance of expressing yourself more faithfully. But you don't do them. You just plan it. That's all. You just get an idea and you have some reflection, and this is very mental, and you use the evidence that you got from doing the reality check, use the evidence that you got from just kind of listening to yourself and feeling into things, and you use the evidence that you got when you eliminated your self-sabotage and actually admitted what you really want to do. And then when you did it, stage 2 and 4, they're very similar, but stage 4, where you really let go of the dogma, is a more committed practice in listening to yourself. So you get the evidence from all those 4 stages and you draw up a bit of a plan, and that's about it. And then you kind of sit with that and ruminate on that. And then if it feels like a good idea, then we move to stage 6, which is testing the waters. And with stage 6, all we're doing is refining and testing if it's really for you. So you might do a little thing. Let's say you're wanting to start your own business, and maybe the business is around something like selling steel signs. So signs that are cut out of steel. Thinking of that because I was given one recently for my birthday. So let's say that you think that that's it. So you might, instead of going and opening a shop or investing, mortgaging the house and investing money in business, you might just get a market stall or something like that. And maybe down the track, if it's really what's true for you and you want to build a big business, perhaps you could build something way down the track which is quite huge in a national or multinational company or something. But in this stage, in stage 6, you just test it, see if it's right for you. In the example of doing drawings, you might just try to put up some drawings in a local cafe or something and start from there. Or if you're incredibly talented, maybe you submit them in competitions and things like that. Or maybe you contact people and go, you know what, I want an agent or someone to look after me, and do you think I've got enough talent? So that could be that. But you don't necessarily go out and buy a gallery or mortgage the children or something like that. You're just refining and testing and finding out if it's for you. Then once you've done that, it's taking a little bit of action. You get more of an idea. So let's say you go out and go to the markets with the steel signs, and you go, you know what, I'm really not that enthusiastic about this. Then you maybe change it a little bit. Or maybe you love it. I had one guy who felt that he wanted to take people on bushwalking tours and so on as business. And then when he voiced the idea to people, they asked him, how much would you charge? And then he realized, hang on, I can't stand the idea of charging for that. The charging for it takes all the joy out of it for me. I couldn't possibly do that. I don't want to do that. That's not me being myself. And so for him, being himself was taking people on bushwalking tours because he felt like it, on his own terms, without having to fulfill some sort of contract or anything. Whereas for another person, taking people on bushwalking tours could very well be like a massively engaging challenge. This is how I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to make money, etc., etc. I'm really excited about how to run that business and how to deliver real value and finding out what people want and giving it to them, and etc., and so on. And they love the whole challenge of that. And that's being themselves for that particular person. Now, for people who are booking from overseas to go on a bushwalking tour, they probably want the second person to be in charge of their tour because they could pay the money and know what they're getting. But if you wanting to casually go on a bushwalking tour in your local area, or you just want to kind of travel around and see what turns up, you might come across a guy who's wanting to take you on a bushwalking tour and is pretty casual about it, and you like the relaxed atmosphere. It's different strokes for different folks. So in other words, stage 6, testing the waters, is you get the idea in stage 5 built on what you've gone through in the previous stages, and then you kind of ruminate on it, and then in stage 6 you just test it a little bit and you get a feel, hang on, I'm heading off in this direction. Do I need to kind of change my trajectory a little bit? Do I need to go a bit to the left or a bit to the right, or do I need to just turn right around altogether? And so this is what you do when it comes to being yourself, because most people won't ever go into the journey of being themselves because they don't even do any of these stages. They go to stage 1 maybe and have a look at what they think is important to them, believe some mental programming in their head which isn't actually accurate. It's just been implanted in there somehow. And then they go off trying to be authentic to themselves with a mental construct only of what is true for them. And they find themselves not committed. They find themselves doing what? Self-sabotage, because they don't even want to do that. Then we've got other people who just follow their instincts and that's all they do, but they don't take into account the pros and cons, the logic behind it. Or maybe you've got people who are just following their heart. There's that saying, follow your heart, but take your head with you. And if you just follow your heart, pretty quickly it all falls apart. And I know, a few people being in the personal development industry who just do the whole, I'm just totally going to follow my heart thing, and they fall into one or two categories as far as I can see. They actually do follow their heart and they don't figure anything out or take care of any details, and it falls apart pretty quick. Or they're following their heart and they are doing the details and, doing the number crunching and so on, and things work, but they're in denial about the fact that they're doing details. I know one person who says, don't worry about money, we just charge whatever. But then at the end of the day, he's got very good cash control. Like he's a master. Like to him, it's second nature. Much better than pretty much anybody I know. So, so if you go through the stages, you bring your head, your heart, and your instincts into it. And then you test the waters and you can find out what's really true for you and what's not. But then comes stage 7 where you actually commit. Where you're like, okay, I've got an idea now and I'm going to go for it. And you make a real decision to follow your own truth. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean, remember there's 12 stages. This is stage 7, right? And we're making a commitment and we're doing something. This is not to say that you're doing the right thing. This is basically where you commit and take action, and you're willing to take the consequences of not being right, of screwing it up. And I mean, most successful people who feel they're successful or seem successful will tell you that the path to their success was a journey of repeated failure. Because, I mean, failure is not really failure. It's just, if you look at it in a very microscopic or very limited fashion. And I use the example, you've probably heard it before if you've been listening to the webinars. I use this example. If the journey from your house to the corner shop took 100 steps, the way that most people view failure is that the first 99 steps to the shop are failures. Now, it sounds ridiculous when you put it like that, but stage 7 about commitment is like, okay, I am committed that this step is the one that I'm going to take, and that's that. And so you see the photo there of the guy skydiving, just jumping out of the plane. That's just one step, but it's a pretty big commitment, right? Now, here's the thing, most of your commitments will not be anywhere near as pivotal as that step of stepping out of the plane. In fact, you know, I'd say over 85% of the decisions that we make that we think are life-changing and mind-bogglingly important actually don't mean very much at all. They don't make much difference. I mean, you do have some which are like, wow, that was a life-changing thing. And for me, it was, you know, I had a decision to make when I was 16 years old. Do I become an exchange student to go overseas or not? And that changed everything. Now, I can think, if I really sat down, I could think of about 500,000 other decisions I made when I was 16 that didn't, you know, don't stand out as much. Right? So all you're doing in stage 7 is you're making a decision that I'm going to follow my truth here, and that's pretty much it. That's all you're doing. Then when we get to stage 8, that's when it gets really interesting. Stage 8 is called putting it on the line. Got a little photo there from Lord of the Rings. It says, keep calm and go on an adventure. Yeah, so when we're putting it on the line, I've changed the names of all these stages specifically for this webinar, and I'll let you know what the actual name for this stage is. It's called the Supreme Ordeal. And by that, I don't necessarily mean that you're going to get tortured, but by that, what I mean is that you go through an ordeal. And, you know, an ordeal doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. I mean, look at, you know, the process of giving birth. It's wonderful, but it's pretty bloody difficult. Yeah? So, when you commit and you're putting it on the line, you go through a real life adventure that challenges and changes you. And basically that real life adventure, it brings together the aspects of your being, the instinctual self, your intuitive self, your heart self, and your intellectual self, and it makes them all work toward a particular thing, a singular goal. And the ordeal is about a combination of birthing into being of a new you. So this life adventure here challenges and changes you. You do something that you don't believe you can possibly do, or maybe you've had fantasies about it and so on. Now for me, like, I've been speaking, doing public speaking in one form or another for about 28 years. And people ask me, oh, you know, how do you control your nerves with public speaking? And I don't often say this, but the truth is I don't really get nervous. It's just doesn't happen. However, there are two occasions when I was very nervous. One was when I was creating there was a business I ran for about 10 years, and when I did the first delivery of that, I had to do a public presentation. I was scared to death. I could barely get words out. The second time is when I began running Genuine University. I wish you could hear the first webinar that I actually ran, because I was like, you know, you could hear the shaking in my voice. Not because I'm scared about, is it any good or anything like that, but because it is so incredibly important to every fiber of my being. So beginning this for me was an ordeal, but I loved it. And unfortunately, the recording of that very first webinar didn't work because I was so nervous. I screwed it up. So, you know, I made my mistake. Then I went and re-recorded it a few days later so that there was a recording. You know, but man, like I look back, it's only like 8 weeks ago, but I look back on it like, wow, that was a great time. I took this challenge on, and I actually, you know, began to bring into being the thing that I've been working on for decades. And that's what I mean about you putting it on the line. You're really going for something that's important to you. For the guy who's, you know, wanting to do the metal sign business or the steel sign business, it could mean, you know, putting in his first very big order, whereas, you know, it's maybe a quantity of $500, and that's a lot of money for him, or it might be 500,000, or you don't know. There's something in you where you, and this is what happens when you get to stage 8 and you're putting it on the line. You feel these 4 indicators that I've talked about in other webinars. Your mind is engaged. Your heart is open. You feel scared and excited at the same time. So they're the 4. Engaged mind, open heart, scared, excited. And there's also like a 5th one. It's more of a qualifying question. And you kind of, I often ask people this: since you're scared, would you like to give up? And the answer that comes out is like, no way. And, you know, it's almost as though if you try and take the opportunity to undertake this adventure, if you try to take that away from them, they might kill you. Now, probably not literally, but they've got that energy because guess what? Their instincts are involved as well, and they're like, no, this is me defining who I am. And that's why I'm using these stages to talk about being more yourself. Okay, so you go through this ordeal. What's next? Now, if you do it the way that most people will do it, you will get this next stage wrong if you try to guess it, because what most people think comes next is you go through this ordeal and then you just keep going and keep on pushing and, you know, push hard and really, you know, going for it. Whereas stage 9 is rest and reward. Because if you go through an ordeal which integrates the various aspects of your being, you must actually allow them to integrate, 1, actively when you're going through it, and 2, passively by letting it do its own thing. And so you see there's a photo there of somebody with their feet up on a hammock. This is incredibly important. I cannot emphasize how important it actually is, because the people that don't do this stage, when they get to stage 11, they're stuffed. They fail. They fall, you know, they don't start their steel sign business. They end up at a job that they hate. And maybe they're there for a year, 5, 10, the rest of their life. Maybe they in a fit of delusion, they go and burn all their drawings that they were getting ready for their showing or something. Or, you know, if they're trying to deal with a family challenge, maybe they tell their family to go and get stuffed and never speak to them again because they lose the plot. Or maybe they just buckle under and do whatever their family says and become a slave to the family culture or something. Now, that's what can happen in stage 11. We'll get into that in a little bit later, but stage 9 is essential for you to rest and reward yourself and integrate and also enjoy life. You know, you've just gone through an ordeal and you've accomplished something. Enjoy it, soak it up, let people praise you. Okay, so the importance of that really comes into play when we get to stage 11. So it kind of leaves the explanation of stage 9 hanging in the air a little bit. Stage 10 is about communication. This is where you've learned something about yourself and you've got something to share with others, you know, steel signs, drawings, a new family culture, whatever the case may be. What is it that you would love to be sharing with others? This is also a way of giving you a clue, and it also helps you with the reality check. If, while you're learning about stage 10 now, if you ask yourself, what treasure would you really love to share with others? And so the thing is this, you share it with others in a way and you communicate what you've discovered or what you're wanting to deliver. You share it in such a way that it is of value to others so that perhaps they'll support you in some way in continuing to be yourself. And this is why I run a program called Make Money Doing What You Love, because I want people to be able to do what they love and get paid for it, or rather, I don't care if they get money or whatever, just get some way of sustaining yourself so you can keep doing it. And I mean, there are a lot of people out there who think that doing what you love is reserved for between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. on a Sunday night, and that's about it, because you've got to slave away for the rest of the week. And then there are other people who love their job and, you know, go and do what they love on the weekend because they don't want to charge for it. They get excited about doing a job to support themselves to do this thing on the weekend. You know, so I know some sort of medical practitioners in various modalities who save up for a year or two so that they can go to a third world country and deliver their speciality for free. And that's what they love doing. Brilliant, brilliant stuff. Then I know other people. I know a few doctors who hate what they do. And I don't know, I don't think sending them to a third world country would be much of a benefit. Yeah, so anyway, I'm digressing slightly here. Stage 11. This is called Mouse with a Lion's Shadow. Now, I emphasized stage 11 a little bit when I was explaining stage 9. And basically in stage 11, what tends to happen is the little things that you haven't really integrated properly, they pop up and try to scare the bejesus out of you. And I call it Mouse with a Lion's Shadow because they're really not powerful at all. They just look powerful, but they're actually tiny and can't really hurt you. But if you haven't rested in stage 9, what will happen is you'll get caught up in the delusion and you'll believe the image before you that a lion is going to devour you, and then you are lost. So it is imperative that you rest and recuperate and integrate in a passive way in stage 9. Otherwise, you will not be able to defeat the little demons that want to pop out, because what happens with behavior patterns is when we don't feed them or indulge them, and there's, let's say, we're letting go of behavior patterns by integrating and being more yourself. When they're not fed and indulged, they go into a type of torpor or I'm trying to find a simpler way of explaining the word torpor. Basically, it's like a vegetative state. They're dormant. That's what I want to say. They're dormant. They're not dead. They're not gone, but they're not active, and they look dead, but you can't see them, and they're not really doing anything. But then what will happen before they kind of run out of their last bit of energy is they go, that's it, I'm going to get back, I'm going to reclaim my territory, and they have one last burst. And there's not much in it. But if you let it deceive you and you abandon your defenses and run in the other direction, they'll take the castle back. And so if you're awake enough because you've rested to realize what the truth is there, you can just, you know, wave them off and go, yep, oh, that's funny, you're funny. And then that behavior pattern, which may have not been serving you, will just disappear. And I've seen it repeatedly. Okay, so for somebody who's, you know, like wanting to start a business, they might suddenly get a cash flow crunch and think, oh, that's it, I've got to go back and work 9 to 5. Where in actual fact, it was just that somebody didn't deposit some money in the right way, and then they call the very next day and say, oh, that $3,000 that I was giving you, I've screwed it up, and do you mind if I turn up with cash or something, you know? And meanwhile, you might have freaked out and gone and taken a job and made a commitment to a job, and you're like, oh, uh-oh, why did I do that? I should have just held on and seen whether that was even real, that challenge. Stage 12. Stage 11 also helps you solidify your vision and conviction. Stage 12 is the return of the hero, where you simply get to enjoy the world as who you really are. Because, I mean, the world doesn't have to change very much. If you integrate who you are within yourself, suddenly the world becomes a beautiful, miraculous, wonderful place. And it'll have its challenges and difficulties and so on, things that you don't like and things that you want to change about it, but you'll be almost held in your own hand. It's almost like who you really are as a giant hand kind of safely holding you and protecting you from the worst things that could possibly happen to you. Okay, so I'll just quickly go into the next stage, which is decision making. And this is very much aligned with the 12 stages. And basically the 12 stages are there to align the different aspects of our being. Ralph Waldo Emerson says our moods do not know one another. It's kind of like when you're sad, you think you'll never be happy. When you're really happy, you think you'll never be sad, because there's a bit of a divergence in our perception of ourselves. It's also like that through different modes of our being. When we're in our head, we think that whatever we think is completely right. And I mean, don't we love to feel right? And I mean, the head is brilliant at dismissing evidence to the contrary of what we believe. And when we, just talked about the emotions and so on, but when we're feeling like we're in love and generous, we feel like we'll never experience lack. And it's these different levels of being that we have, similar to how our emotions interact or don't interact. This is what I'm talking about, this kind of lack of integration that we don't have, because what integrity is about is actually integrating ourselves, and being yourself is about integration. Integration of the aspects of your being which are otherwise unexpressed. And that's where the eliminating self-sabotage comes into play. Express that part of you that wants to do what you're perhaps falsely labeling as sabotage. So there are different modes of being, and I'll just go through them with you very quickly, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail about it. So I've got a picture of a human, or an outline of a human there. And the first aspect of our being is our instinct. And you could say that's located in our guts, or our viscera, or our liver, perhaps. Then the next aspect of our being is our intuition, which you could say is located in our heart. A lot of people like to put it in the third eye, but my experience has been that it's actually much more heart-based. When you're really intuitive, you actually feel it in that area of your body. When you're convinced that you're intuitive and having a delusion, you think it's in your third eye. Sorry if I'm kind of disagreeing with some of you. The next one is your intellect, which is clearly located in your head. And then the fourth level of being is your inspiration, which is your kind of sense of being connected with something bigger than you. And so I've put it above the head. Now, we could go into a whole lot of metaphysical theories about what inspiration actually is, and that it's a divine gift from God, etc., but I prefer not to go into religious type theories with Genuine University. I just want to put inspiration as being something that connects you with something a lot bigger than you, that's all. So, we'll go into a bit more detail about instinct first up. Your instinct is the part of you that protects you, that helps you to reproduce, and it's about how much power you've got, about how well you can defend yourself and so on. It gives you an immediate response to things. It's action-oriented. So you can imagine, like, if you want to be yourself but you never take any action, I mean, are you actually being yourself? So you need your instinct. It also has a short-term view. It's kind of animalistic, and it can be destructive and primitive. So I've talked about the really, the great things. It's very action-oriented, but it can also destroy stuff. And this is usually the part of us that has anger. And a lot of people focus on the destructive part and primitive part of anger. But I mean, if we get some alignment and we actually engage our heart and our head with the anger, then we've got integration, and you can do amazing things with anger that people actually truly are grateful for and really appreciate. So that's just a little bit of a preview of where we're going with this. Instinct enables engagement of the will to reach specific targets. This is the part of you that says, you know what? My head says this is impossible. My heart is kind of in it though, and I'm bloody well going to do this. I'm going to get this done. And that's one of the beautiful aspects of the instinct. It's good. It's the seat of the will. Also, it helps you focus on yourself and what is in it for you in the immediate future. There's a lot of people that I work with who have felt that they were inspired to do something, and when I ask them, well, what do you get out of it? They say nothing. And then invariably this is what happens. If they say they don't want anything out of it, when I ask the next question, which is, what have you done so far? The answer is the same as the previous question, nothing. Because the instinct isn't engaged. It says, oh, I don't see what's in it for me. What am I going to get out of this? Am I going to get, a relationship with a beautiful person? Am I going to get money or find meals or a really comfy bed? Whatever the case may be. And you need to get something for yourself because, you deserve to be rewarded, especially if you're delivering incredible value into the world. And if you don't look after the instinct, you'll end up with poor health, exhaustion, and no security. And perhaps that's a good path for you. Maybe you want to be a monk or something. And I'm not disparaging that. I just not sure how integrated that actually is. The next part of being is our intuition. And our intuition wants us to experience expansion and love and self-improvement. And it's beautiful and it has a very broad view and it's very altruistic and kind and patient. And if it's really kind, then it enables the instinct to also be what it is. And I'm not saying, with the instinct stuff, I'm not saying just be an animal. I'm saying, respect it and, tailor the expression of the instinct accordingly. And we'll go into that a little bit more in a minute. The intuition seems to have internal patience, but it also means there's not much action happening because, I'm so patient that I can wait in eternity because I'm so kind. Yeah. The intuition also likes to focus on the broader picture in relation to community and longer-term benefits to the many. It's kind of like this, what is great for the community and so on. It doesn't tend to have a sense of direction. It's amorphous. It tends to have a sense of emptiness in all endeavors, and you can often get caught up in living for others if you're on the heart level too much. It's kind of like that bleeding heart type thing. That if you don't have your instinct engaged, you're not going to be able to bring these beautiful expressions of the intuition into being. The next level is the intellect. And the intellect is obviously about logic and planning and rational thought and so on. It also helps you look after details and helps you evaluate reality. Maybe your instinct tells you that you should go and fight that bear that's in the woods because your fight or flight response is well and truly activated and you've gone into the fight response. Whereas your intellect could come in and go, yeah, no, that's not a good idea. One swipe of the bear's paw and you're dead, buddy. Yeah? I know I've had a similar kind of rationale occur being in the bush in Australia and kind of dealing with snakes and so on. I tended to like to tease snakes that thought I couldn't see them. So just stupid kind of instinctual response. But then, of course, my intellect comes into play and stops me actually doing it. Yeah. And I bet if you're honest, you'll have some other really dumb thing that you have an instinct toward doing. There's actually a mental predisposition for about 30% of the population to want to jump off high structures. That's an instinctual response. But our intellect in most cases tells us, no, that's a bad idea. Okay, the intellect can also get obsessed with details. And, where's my mouse gone? Also gets obsessed with details, and it can also be controlling about what's going on and can be quite delusional about things. But one thing that's good about it is it plans out systems within our control and extends our control beyond previous boundaries. Another bad thing about it is the intellect also tends toward inaction, intellectual masturbation, and self-importance. And the self-importance aspect is where a lot of people think that their intuition is actually in their head, because the intellect likes to think it's the all-knowing. The intellect does like to get into a few places and kind of muddy the waters, and inspiration is another area that it likes to get into. Inspiration is about purpose and fulfillment of your mission. This is the part that's above your head. You can enroll others and have a broad impact if you're really inspired. Don't we love somebody who's inspired? We tend to just want to enlist in what they're doing. You know, go to their restaurant if they're inspired in what they do. Buy their steel signs if they're inspired by it. You know, buy their artwork if it's inspiring to us, that sort of thing. Sometimes inspiration is mistaken for delusion and can be used as justification for heinous acts. I mean, there's many, many examples in the history books of people thinking that they're on some inspired path, but they're just deluded, stuck in their head, and they go and do the most horrific things. So you need to be careful. If you're completely positive that you're inspired and you've got millions of reasons why, you're probably not. When you're inspired, you don't know. People tend to tell you that you're inspired. Don't tell them you're inspired. Let them tell you. Inspiration can make something greater than existed before when it's nurtured by relationship. So in other words, if you kind of temper it by seeing how it feeds into business relationships, personal relationships, acquaintances, whatever, you know, relationships to communities and so on, it can actually do amazing things when it's tempered in that way. And when you are just stuck in what you might think is inspiration, you can often get a sense of hopeless futility. When you get old, if you're only stuck in what you think is inspiration, as you get older, you tend to get futility accumulated in you instead of wisdom and compassion. So that's another way of measuring whether you're inspiration or not. Do you end up feeling futile and bitter, or do you feel wise and compassionate down the track? So, when combined, the 4 I's, as I call them, inspiration, intellect, intuition, and instinct, when combined together, the 4 I's enable a heartfelt sense, intuition, to be translated into a conceptualized vision, which is what the intellect gives us, that is then acted upon with our instincts. And when this is done, then inspiration habitually, when you do that habitually, inspiration becomes activated. Now, going through the 12 stages described previously allows you to bring your intellect, intuition, and instinct into alignment, and it brings about an increased level of serendipity. And serendipity is like this thing where it's almost like you get this type of luck happening, but you know that you deserve it. Luck is often characterized by, oh wow, I know, lucky, and you know, I don't really see how that happened. But when it's serendipity, it's almost like it's luck, and you go, yes, that is exactly the right thing to be happening right now, and you know it in every aspect of your being. And at this point, being yourself actually becomes really easy. And this is what I said in the previous webinar about being yourself, that the advice to be yourself is actually quite useless, because when you're not aligned, let's say you're totally focused on instinct, being yourself and being aligned and inspired and intuitive and actually using your head is really not going to happen, especially if you're enraged because you've been sexually betrayed or something like that. Let's say your instinct is like, I'm going to kill. Yeah, it's pretty hard to like be yourself in an aligned way. You might be being yourself on an animal, you know, revenge level, but unless you have those alignments, being yourself, the advice to be yourself is pretty useless. So each of the 12 stages address each level individually, and then we combine it as we go forward, and the results are pretty extraordinary. So in the reality check, what you're doing is you're using your intellect. In listening to yourself, you're getting in line with what your instinct might be telling you, what your heart might be telling you. And then when you're eliminating self-sabotage, you're actually looking at what your instincts want to do and giving them a bit of acceptance to share their wisdom with you. And then when you let go of dogma, it's almost like, hey, maybe the inspiration won't come, but I'm opening myself up to that inspiration. Then when you test the waters, you engage your intellect in a bit of your instinct. And when you consider action, you engage your intellect in a bit of instinct. And then when you test the waters, you kind of engage your heart a little bit because you're actually opening up to something, and also your instinct. And then when you commit, that's when you start aligning your intellect with, the plans that you've made, your intuition about what feels right, and the instinct of like, okay, does this action feel right? And then when you put it on the line in stage 8, you actually do what you think is right, so you've got your intellect involved there. You do what you feel is right, and what's going to expand you, and your intuition is right, is engaged, and your instincts engaged because of what you feel. And then usually that sense of inspiration of like, this is going to expand me, comes into play right at that moment. And that's why when asked, do you want to give up on this, if you've got the right alignments, people always go, no chance in hell am I going to give up on this, because this is who I am. And then when you go further into the stages and you rest and reward, you actually kind of allow these 4 aspects of your being, which have been combined together so nicely through an ordeal, you let them start to kind of heal and meld together and grow organically together. And then you start learning in stage 10 how to communicate that with the rest of the world. Then stage 11, the mouse with the lion's shadow, you kind of iron out the kinks a little bit, unless you're too exhausted from not resting in stage 9. And then you become far more integrated than ever before and get to experience the world as who you really are. And so that's the core of being more yourself, in my opinion. And this is something that I hope is incredibly valuable to you. I hope that this is not too heady and not too intellectual for the average person, but we do go through all of these things in the Genuine University programs. Real Results that program teaches you how to map out all of these areas and how to move through the stages and so on, and how to help each other do it. And then the other programs are very, very good at getting you on track and actually being who you are. And generally I find that people often graduate beyond this sort of work, and then there are other people who graduate into just expanding in this sort of work more and more, and there's room for both avenues in this work. I just want to have a quick word about essence and form, and a note on compromise. Basically, a lot of people say that you shouldn't compromise yourself. And other people say that life is about compromise. And I just want to kind of give you a distinction here. I say that you shouldn't compromise the essence of who you are, but perhaps compromise on how that is actually delivered. Because if the essence of who you are is to be an artist, then maybe the particular way that you might express that, you might change that a little bit according to what materials you've got available, what type of things you enjoy getting a positive response from in other people. So maybe you're an artist who doesn't want to change the way that they do their work, and you don't care how other people respond to it. Or maybe you're an artist who really loves when people enjoy your work, and so you might change the form a little or a lot according to what is actually true to your essence. So changing the form of what you do should not be considered as important as being true to the essence of what you're doing. As long as the essence is represented, fair enough. Okay, and I'll go into more about that in later webinars. I have a saying that we are all the same in essence and all unique in expression. So we are pretty much at time here, and I've talked a little bit about Genuine University and what Real Results actually are, and the last few slides are actually about Genuine University. We're people who work on being ourselves and take action on our truth according to those stages and so on, and we want to offer real value to the world. And these webinars are free. The actual being taken through the stages and everything is something that is part of a paid membership. But with these webinars, please feel free to share them with whoever you feel can benefit from them, because part of the way that I want to promote Genuine University is by offering a whole lot of value that people don't actually have to invest in to find out whether it's right for them, because I don't want people involved if it's not right for them. So the webinars are about purpose realization, making money doing what you love, and there's 38 of them between May of 2014 and February 2015. So the network of the Real Results Network is really what's important here, because with that you get to be with people who are supporting you and being you, they challenge you to be you, and they help you follow your truth and generate sustainable prosperity if that's important to you. So basically I want to finish off in the same way that I finish off generally, and we've got the 4 indicators here. Engage, we teach you how to get onto those supreme ordeals, those challenges that are right for you, that engage your mind, open your heart, that scare you and excite you. And the Real Results program in Genuine University is about giving you leverage to bring your dreams into reality. And as Archimedes said, if you give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, I shall move the world. And that's what I want Genuine University to be for a great many people. So please feel free to share this information in whatever way you see fit, as long as you have, the Genuine University name and link. I don't care how you do it. So thank you very much for being with us during this webinar. My name is Peter Haggerty from Genuine University, and I hope to see you on the next webinar, which is simply titled Clarity is Power. I think that pretty much explains itself.